Last month, just 71,000 people tuned in to the WSL's marquee fixture as Arsenal faced Chelsea at the Emirates. That's barely more than the 57,000 who were in the stadium and 10 times lower than the same fixture last season. The WSL has a massive problem. Let's talk about it. So this has been a problem since the start of the season, but it came to a head just a few weeks ago. Chelsea taking on Arsenal in the WSL and incredibly low viewership. So let's dive into it. Let's talk about Sky Sports, the issues there. Let's talk about the broadcasting problem and dive into your complaints around the TV picks. It all started really, Harry, at the start of this campaign when Sky came in and 5 years, £65 million deal. And under that deal, Sky agreed to broadcast 118 matches a season. And on paper, that sounds brilliant. But it's not all been perfect, has it?
No, it hasn't. I think that, again, there are pros and cons to this deal, of course. But one of the huge cons is the viewership and the problem it creates by putting the majority of games behind a paywall. Of course, it's great for the publicity and the the income towards the WSL, but if people can't watch it, that is also going to hurt it massively. But yeah, a lot of complaints, as you say. I think that when the deal was announced, it was a pretty positive reaction, but once you really realise what that means for fans and what that means for people who don't have Sky, it makes it very difficult to watch the games. And again, they screen these big numbers at you. Oh, you can watch so many games live on Sky, but if you don't have Sky, that number is more about on how many games you're actually missing out on rather than are available to you. So it's a really difficult one. It's been a tough one, and it's been, I think, for most fans who obviously don't have access to Sky, it's been a bit of a disappointing season because you can't really enjoy a campaign, you can't really enjoy watching a league if you can't watch it or watch any of the games, apart from highlight packages.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so many avenues of discussion that we can go down today. I don't want to miss any, but that problem with Sky and the paywalling is definitely a big one. Do you think it was a case with the agreement of this deal, the WSL were chasing money after the Euros, £65 million over 5 years? Obviously, they look at that, your eyes light up, 65 million quid coming into the league. That is a very good deal for the WSL. But it almost feels to me that they could have taken a less aggressive paywalling option for less money over a shorter time span and scaled it up. And they probably could have got more money in 3 years' time than they will now because they can't renegotiate that for 5 years. So it almost feels to me that while this looks like a brilliant deal in the short term, or at least it did when it was signed in the summer, I do just wonder whether now the WSL would be regretting it somewhat. Viewing numbers are down and they can't renegotiate this deal now until, 2030?
Yes.
I mean, that is not a great deal for the WSL. So there's been a lot of complaints around the paywall, the timings, the scheduling. We're going to go through those different problems. We're going to look at some comments that we've had in the community tab as well and dive into them. And let's start with problem one, which is the timing. We've got a message from Sarah on Twitter. We put this out on Twitter and the YouTube community tab. So make sure you're following us on Twitter or you're checking that community tab regularly if you want to get involved. But this was from Sarah on Twitter, who said the 12 p.m. Sunday as a kickoff time is bad for travelling. It clashes with family and kids, grassroots stuff in the morning. I'm watching only my team now, whilst before I'd be watching 2 or 3 games. And the Sky deal has taken too many matches. It's a hideous jump up in the paywalling of games. So we'll put the paywalling aside because we'll get to that in a moment. But just focusing on the timing, what do you think of Sky's decision now to move to that 12 o'clock slot? Most Sky Air WSL matches this season have been at either 11:55 or 12 o'clock on Sunday or Saturday. What do you think of that time slot?
I think it's a difficult. I think it's a really poor decision, to be perfectly honest. Of course, they want to try and build up this 4 games at 12 o'clock, multiple games at 12 o'clock. Let's get multi-view running. Let's get, you can watch all the action. But again, that's only, not many people want to do that. It's very difficult. You want to watch your team. You want to watch one game. You don't watch 3 games at once. I think if anyone who's ever tried to watch 3 games of football at once, it's near on impossible. You cannot concentrate on all 3 of them or see what's going on perfectly in all 3 of them. So putting all the games or putting the majority of games on at the same time, it makes it really, really difficult, especially when you've got, some big clashes in the league. When you've only got 12 teams in the division, it's one of those where for the neutrals, you want to watch every game because every game matters at each end of the table. And for fans of clubs, you always want to watch your team. But if you're a fan of a team towards the bottom end of the table, you want to watch your team. But you're also going to want to watch the big games like Chelsea, Arsenal, and the other huge matches. So how do you choose between watching those kind of games? I think that it's put fans in a very difficult position, having to choose which games they want to watch, rather than being able to sit down on a Sunday or sit down at the weekend and just enjoy watching all of them, or at least the majority of them. It's very difficult. I mean, we'll be sat here streaming one game, but we'll have notifications going bam, bam, bam because there's 3 other games on, and you want to enjoy all of those games rather than just hearing about them through a notification on your phone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, I think you mentioned the multi-view there, and that's exactly why Sky are doing this. I mean, they've come out with prioritising a regular midday WSL slot to create habit formation and appointment to view. So the idea is that if all the games are on at 12 o'clock every Sunday, everyone knows that at 12 o'clock every Sunday, you sit down and you watch the WSL games. But it feels more to me that they've brought in multi-view this year, and they wanted a sport to trial it on, and they've chosen the WSL because I don't think it's worked at all. I think it's been so bad for fans, so bad for players, and so bad for TV audiences. This is a problem. Who is benefiting at the moment from the Sky deal? It doesn't feel like anyone. I mean, us. Are we the ones that are benefiting because people have to watch us because they can't physically watch Sky Sports?
But even so, I'm not here most Sunday mornings. Anyone knows what the channel is that knows I'm not on the Sunday morning streams because
Or Saturdays or Tuesdays.
Okay, but it's one of those where if you're involved in grassroots football, you miss it all. And the way they've messed up, and I think the biggest thing they've messed up in terms of the timings is that, as you say, by putting it on at 12 o'clock and putting all the games on at 12 o'clock. Not only you've taken away fans, people can't go to the ground because they're at football games in the morning, but because they're also at football games, it means they also can't watch it because they can't watch a football game while you're playing football. But so you've taken out both audiences at once, and for me that's astonishing as to how you do that. I don't understand how you take out the TV audience while also taking out a large chunk of the in-person audience. It's incredible what Sky have managed to do.
It is the most perfectly awful idea that they could have possibly done with the TV scheduling. And yeah, I think it's had a drastic impact on viewership in the UK in terms of fans going to games as well, and on, I think, most people's enjoyment of the sports. That's been a huge loss. I think the problem is Sky are torn in the same way that the WSL are a bit at the moment. And I mean, I think Sky Sports Halo, as dramatic as a failure as that was, shows exactly the problem right now. And it's that Sky and the WSL don't know who to market the game at. And it's such a problem because the data is there that more male fans watch women's sport than female fans. And so to that extent, they're prioritising this 12 o'clock slot because there's not a Premier League game on at 12 o'clock. So you think, well, the men will just put the TV on and the 12 o'clock game will be on and they'll watch that and then they'll watch their normal games. So what Sky are targeting is people who already watch football, just watching women's football on the side. And I think there is a huge audience for that. I think a large number of people who are now dedicated about women's football came through that way. They were men's football fans who started watching the women's game. But I think the problem is, by doing that, not only has that not been successful, but it's also pushed away a lot of female fans getting into the sport for the first time. The accessibility this year has been a huge problem, not only just because it's paywalled, but also because it's 12 o'clock. Huge grassroots clash. Many grassroots games and youth football games happen in the morning, and this clash is either Saturday or Sunday is going to clash with the WSL games, which doesn't make any sense because young fans can't attend the games if they're playing football at the same time.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I think that again, it's not because it's not even the players that are playing. You're taking away the parents, you're taking away anyone else that goes to watch, you're taking away the coaches. There is huge people, everyone there, because they're at a grassroots game on a Sunday in a girls' league. They're big fans of women's football. They want to go watch the games. Clearly they care about the sport, but you're taking away so many people from watching that game. It's a massive loss of audience. And again, if you think about how many games are being played across the country on a Sunday morning, you're missing out massively. And I think that it's especially with the consistency, every single week. That's happening every single week. So yeah, it's a big loss because there's a lot of people involved in the at the moment who, if you're involved in the grassroots game, you miss the start. You miss at the very most. You miss at the very least. You miss the first half of those 12 o'clock games.
But it's also very difficult to get. It's almost impossible to get to games.
Yeah.
Because especially if you're a travelling fan, even if you're not going to grassroots football in the morning, you've probably got to travel up the night before now, or get a very early train, or be able to drive because the timings are so poor for travelling fans. I think this has been a problem all season. It always also extends to Manchester United Chelsea, which was a Friday night away in Manchester. I mean, that is just terrible scheduling. And again, Sky are terrible for this anyway. I know there's a lot of clubs in the Football League who complain about it. There'll be a right northern club and they've got to play right down south, and it's 8 p.m. on a Monday or something stupid like that. And it is a problem across all of Sky, but it's definitely a problem in the women's game. And there are certain games you can put in certain slots. The Manchester Derby, for example, could easily be a Friday night slot and be that sort of prime time game. Could be an evening game because it's a local derby, so it's not too far to travel. So you can play it at that late evening or that early morning slot. They both work for that sort of game. But when you've got two sides that have got to travel a bit of a distance, it needs to be more middle of the day, so there are more transport routes before and after kickoff. Let's get as well to platform and accessibility then, because we've got another message from Sebas on YouTube saying, it's not going very well. I live in New Zealand. I have a Sky Sports subscription, but sometimes not all the WSL matches are on here. Don't even get me started on WSL and Disney Plus. The premium is utter bin emoji. I'm going to guess rubbish. I significantly reduced my watch time of the WSL. I instead watch the NWSL or attend a local grassroots match and catch up with the WSL via highlights. I think this is a big thing this season, is that because people can't watch all the games live, the WSL are sort of pushing these highlights packages. And when you actually watch a highlights package on the WSL, it's more like watching the full game, because it starts, the highlights you normally expect to start from the first chance and it's a highlights package. But these are 10 minutes long, and it starts with the players coming out of the tunnel and that whole long drawn out thing. Then the actual football match is like 3 minutes, and it's all very quick, very sharply edited. And then you get 5 minutes at the end of post match. It's a really bizarre way to do a highlights package, but it's almost like they're creating these mini games for me. Like, it's almost like they're going, well, you can't watch the game, but here is a mini version of it. And it definitely feels that while the main TV numbers are dropping, I think things like platforms like TikTok and YouTube are seeing this huge growth for women's football.
Yeah, exactly that. I think that, again, they're trying to turn 90-minute football matches into short-form content, which is a really interesting concept, because that should all, it should all be broken up. You should, if you post-match and pre-match are separate to the actual game. You want to watch a highlights package, you should want to watch the majority of the match, or at least the key elements of it. But yeah, it seems to be, let's try and condense highlights down to a minute max, and it's just the goals. Of course, that does well, and as you say, people on social media, they're able to scroll through and just watch the goals, and for some people that will work. You'll get to see the goals, you'll get to comment down when comment under your favourite team's goal, and that's a way of consuming it. But that doesn't represent the game as a whole. You can't represent a 90-minute match within a minute, a couple of minutes of a highlight package, and then that creates a whole another problem about people's opinions on certain games that always comes round at the end of a match week. Because if you watch a game and you only watch a minute of it and you watch the goals, you walk out of that game going thinking, oh well, the team that won were absolutely brilliant, because that's all you've seen. I think that fans want to get a whole picture of the game, so if you're not going to let them watch, if they can't watch it live because it's impossible because all the games are at the same time, we still want to get an accurate representation of that game in the highlights package, rather than just watching the players walk out of a tunnel for a minute, watching a couple of minutes of football, and then just listening to what the managers have got to say at the end of the game.
Yeah, and again, I feel they're pushing towards short form content, and I know that's hugely popular in the women's game. I think it's the new way to sort of view content, and I think that for the more traditional sports that have this long-standing viewership, they will happily sit through and watch 90 minutes. But I think there is now this push towards making sports more, not short, making sports more sort of friendly towards this quick viral moments, rather than sort of a dedicated thing that you go to every week and you love the club. And I think again that they're pushing towards leaning into those parasocial relationships and stuff like that. And I think again it shows this problem, because you've got a set of fans who are incredibly, and again, I usually say men and women. That's not what I mean. But there's two sort of subsections of WSL fans. You've got people who really love the sport and they're interested in sort of the depth of the sport and the football. But you've also got a large group of people who are interested in the personalities, and that is something that we've never had to contend with really until the modern day with sports. And it's really interesting to see how the WSL is trying to handle that, because I mean, like I mentioned, Sky Sports Halo. That's I think exactly the wrong way to go about it. But there is a market there. There are people who will not. I mean, matcha ice latte or whatever it was. That's not what I mean, but there is a market for people who are more interested in sort of the personalities of the sport and more interested in that sort of parasocial relationship than the sport itself. And so I think it's very interesting to see how the WSL are trying to cater for those two markets. But I think the problem is at the moment they seem to be failing on all fronts. But back to the platform accessibility. Many of the Sky broadcast games are now behind a paywall, limiting access. We're seeing now one game a weekend on BBC. Sky have got the other 5, and usually a couple of them are on YouTube. But broadly, most of the games now are on Sky. I think the other thing is most of the big games are on Sky.
Yeah.
And this is what's seen. I mean, I mentioned it in the intro, but Arsenal-Chelsea dropping to 71,000 average viewers from 731,000 last year. Now, of course, last year was free to air. It was during a men's international break, and those have huge impacts. But a 10x drop in viewership because Sky put it on at 12 o'clock on a Saturday, and it clashed directly with Tottenham versus Manchester United in the men's game. It's such poor scheduling.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, they got it horribly wrong, and I think that when you've got five games is a lot. When you've only got 6 games in a game week, to give one broad. I mean, again, I still think it needs looking at, because if you're going to give one broadcaster 5, you might as well give them 6. I think the fact that you've got so many different, again, we'll come on platforms in a minute, but you've got so many different ways to watch it in loads of different areas, in loads of different ways, doesn't help. But giving Sky 5 and putting 5, going from one or two games behind a paywall to throwing 5. I know a couple of them are on YouTube sometimes, but I think that...
But the couple that are on YouTube are never the games that are going to draw people in.
Yes.
No disrespect, but if it's Leicester versus Aston Villa, and that was 0-0 this season, that's not going to draw new fans in. But Arsenal-Chelsea would. And that is the problem at the moment, because obviously Sky want to have the big games. So people have to buy Sky to be able to watch the big games. But it just creates a problem because they're also the games that bring fans in. And while the sport is still growing, you need those games. And if that was free to air, I think on the BBC that Saturday morning, the Arsenal-Chelsea game, I think the numbers probably would have been much closer to what we saw last season. I think the fact that it is free to air would be a huge token against sort of the Premier League. Because if it's the same time as Man United Tottenham, and you've got a choice of, I can't watch Sky Sports because I don't have Sky Sports, but look, Chelsea Arsenal's on free to air, you're going to watch Chelsea Arsenal. It's a good chance you may consider that. So I think, again, it's just been a huge problem in terms of pushing new fans away from the sport. And there are some risks with how they've gone about it so far. In terms of those short-term risks, continued low TV audiences could threaten the perceived value of WSL matches, especially regarding future broadcast deals, because I don't think Sky would be looking at their 65 million as a particularly great investment into, when you consider the numbers haven't really been there. And I think other sponsorship and commercial partners would also probably look at that and question the reach of the sport.
Yeah, it's the broadcast deal is a really difficult one to touch on, because obviously the money is needed, but as you say, I think with that, the value of the deal, I don't think 65 million was needed right now to make that jump from 1 or 2 games or being on Sky to now going to 5 straight up to 65 million pounds. As you say, I think it's the kind of thing where in 5 years, are Sky going to want to go much higher than that? Probably not, because if the audience stay as they are, then where's going to be that incentive to increase that kind of the value of that deal? If they scaled it up and say gone for 30 million for the next 2 years, and there were only 3 or 4 games, that makes it a bit difficult. But it makes it a bit different. But yeah, I think that it's one of those where are Sky going to want to fork out another 65 million when, let's be honest, the biggest game of the season only had 70-odd thousand people watching it? That's not what Sky are looking for. That's not what, that Sky aren't getting their money worth there with 65 million, 65 million quid deal. So it's definitely something they need to look at. And again, as you say, if only 70,000 people are watching that game, then sponsors and commercial and all that, they're going to look at that and go, well, that's not reaching the kind of audience we want it to. Of course, it's a bit different because their sponsors and stuff get plastered all over Sky's build up and pre-match and all that. But as you say, if only 70,000 people are seeing all of that, if I'm a sponsor of one of these football clubs or I'm a sponsor of the league, I'm going to go, well, hang on a minute, I'm getting a lot less coverage than I was last season. A lot less eyes are on my company, but I'm paying the same amount of money. So yeah, I think that they've got to be careful that people don't. There's because after the Euros and over the last couple of years, it's been a big thing. If you're a sponsor, you can get on women's football because it's rapidly growing. Happy days, you're on the market. But if the audiences are going to get killed by putting so many games behind a paywall, then those sponsors aren't going to be as keen to get involved.
Yeah, exactly. I think the problem is that Sky are viewing it in the same way as the men's game, in that we've got it, so you've got to pay for it. The difference is, I mean, obviously, even then, it's not really working in the men's game anymore because piracy has become a huge thing. I think, more people in the UK probably watch football on a dodgy stick than they do on Sky Sports these days. So, I mean, it's not necessarily true, but the fact that the difference is that men's football has 50 years of following. I mean, more than that, but 50 years on TV. And women's football doesn't have that same sort of backing. It doesn't have that relationship where people go, well, I can't possibly miss the game.
Yeah.
And you're still in a moment where you want the sport to grow. So to put it all behind a paywall hasn't worked at all.
Yeah.
So let's discuss solutions then. We had another comment on YouTube from When Sky's the Blue saying, as someone who actually attends WSL matches, all matches should be free to watch on TV, especially as crowd attendance is low and mainly substandard stadiums. Is fully free to air the answer? Is it plausible? Is it the solution to the problem?
To put it simply, it's not realistically going to happen because the league needs money. The WSL could not function without a broadcast deal. The broadcast deal is one of the biggest investors, one of the biggest incomes to the league. There's no way that the WSL could go completely free to air because there wouldn't be enough money in the sport to keep going. That 65 million deal from Sky is absolutely massive to support the league and give it enough money to grow. And that's why we're seeing now clubs can start bringing in those £1 million transfers because the league has the investment and the infrastructure to do so. If you take away all of that, and the league's got absolutely nothing, and we're back to it would go back to what women's football was years and years ago, where it didn't have enough money in it to be professional and be as strong as it is now. So there has to be games behind a paywall because that's what brings money into sport. So you have to have some sort of reason. You have to have some games on Sky, and it's fine. Like we had a couple of years, like we had the last couple of years where we had 2 or 3 games. It's been bringing money into the league, but there's still games free to air. So it couldn't go fully free to air because the league just wouldn't be able to support itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So where does that compromise lie? How can they... I mean, obviously, for the next 5 years, it's locked into Sky Sports. So there's got to be a conversation there. Apparently, the higher-ups of the WSL are not happy with the performance of the 12 o'clock slot, and so that will be a discussion. And I'm hopeful that even if Sky don't change it this season, that they'll have to change it next season, just for Sky's personal reasons. Because, I mean, that is the thing. They won't change anything until it affects their bottom line.
Yeah.
But if the advertisers aren't happy, suddenly everything's going to change. So, yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. But I think that will have to be a discussion. But more longer term, in 5 years when that Sky deal is up, what can change for the WSL?
I think it's one of those where even if you don't take the amount of games, even if you don't take the amount of games away from Sky, so say Sky or whoever the pay wall broadcaster would be, if they've still got 5 games, that's not necessarily a terrible problem because if they spread them out, you can get away with it. I think that is another thing. That is the big thing as well, is that because if you told people you'll pay for Sky, but you will be able to watch 4 out of the 5 Sky games on a weekend, then you're more likely to pay for that. If people go, you pay for it, but you can only watch 1 a weekend because we put them all at the same time. So I think that even obviously some people will say that you should take some game, not 5 games shouldn't be behind a paywall each week, but I think you can still do that if you put them on at different times and you get more value for money because suddenly you're paying for 4 games on a Sunday rather than paying for just 1 or multi-view.
Yeah, well, I don't understand how... multi-view is great if you just want it on in the background. If you're actually watching the sport, multi-view it just doesn't work for me personally. I mean, I'm sure there's people who have different opinions, so do get involved in the comments down below, but I just can't consume sport that way. I think the compromise is, because they're trying to hit 2 different audiences right now, is that you need a WSL package. So if you are just a fan, I mean, obviously the timing slots need to change. For me, I'd have a Friday night game involving some of the smaller sides every now and then. I think, especially Champions League weeks, there's no reason why if there's a game between 2 bottom half clubs, well, they couldn't play on a Friday night, for example. And then that brings more, attraction to those clubs. especially sort of local derbies and stuff. There's no reason why a Merseyside derby couldn't be a Friday night. Not a ridiculously late, like 8:15 kickoff like we've seen before, but a 7 o'clock kickoff or something like that could work really nicely for that sort of game. So, yeah, I think obviously the slots have got to change, but what they need to have to sort of attract the two audiences is that the normal Sky package gives you the WSL. So you could still attract those people that watch Sky anyway, but there should be a separate package for people who just want to watch the Women's Super League. Because I think if that was very fairly priced, people would pay that and they would get a lot more viewership. But the problem is people don't want to pay that. So instead they will go to piracy. They will go and get a VPN and watch it in a country where it's free on YouTube because that is still, that is a much cheaper alternative. Sky have got to make it more attractive. For me, in 5 years, I wouldn't even... If I was the WSL, I'd be thinking about an independent sort of thing. I know obviously like it was on the FA Player and that wasn't great because the camera operators weren't there. You don't really have the same sort of level of coverage. So what I'm talking about is a proper in-house production where you create your own sort of service, your own streaming platform where you can pick and choose which games are free to air and which games are you pay for. I think you can set the price there at a much more... The thing is, it's about where do you get that £65 million from?
Yeah.
And over 5 years, we've got to bear that in mind. So, if you divide that by 5, it's 12 million? 13 million, something along those lines.
Yeah.
Great maths. So you've got to get 13 million a year. But I think if you can get sign-ups at a very reasonable fee, you can still have advertisers on there. You then create a platform for the fans. You can have separate... I mean, I think, you look at the sort of the Sky Sports content around the game, and there's not enough. There's no analysis outside of the matches. There's you get interviews with managers and players and stuff like that, and that's nice, but there's not enough in-depth coverage of the league, and the only way they're going to get that is if they do it themselves. Yeah. So I think that's the way they should go in 5 years. I don't think they will. I think they will still be with Sky and BBC. I don't think it'll be long before they lose the BBC as well, unfortunately, because it seems to be going all behind a paywall. But I think the WSL's got to push for more games free to air because you've got to draw fans in. Yeah. That's got to be the push for the WSL. I think that rounds up everything unless you've got anything else to say, Harry. Well, I'm sure everyone in the comments will have a lot to say. I know there's been a hotly debated topic. So do get involved in the comments down below. Let us know your thoughts on the WSL's TV packages, what you think of the problems with the rights this season. We haven't even touched on the fact that the Women's Champions League is on Disney Plus this year. That is a whole other discussion. So again, feel free to have that in the comments down below. So let us know your thoughts. So that, though, is everything. Thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.